Thank you for having me, Shannon.
Okay, I want to quickly take people, walk through this again. Back in April of 2016, you were approached by Professor Mifsud, where he's described as somebody who's Maltese. He has a conversation with you. He drops this information or suggestion about the fact, hey, I heard the Russians may have some emails or something on Hillary Clinton. May of 2016, a month later, you have outreach from an Australian diplomat who also brings this up with you. You think he's recording the conversation. It seems odd to you. September of that same year, then Stefan Halper, who's a professor, also later apparently an FBI informant, he wants to have conversations with you. You think he may be having recordings. You've talked with the Mueller team about all of these things. Was there any attempt to kind of link the threads together and try to determine about whether this had been some kind of setup to specifically snag you?
That's a great question, and the answer is very simple. If all of these individuals that you just mentioned were never even discussed with Bob Mueller's team, especially Stefan Halper, and I'll get to that in a minute. So as you stated, there was this professor, Joseph Mifsud, who the FBI and Bob Mueller characterized as some sort of Russian agent who was delivering this information unsolicited in my lap about the Russians having Hillary Clinton's emails. Now, this person was introduced to me by an FBI intermediary at a company I used to work for in London named the London Center for International Law Practice, and I met Joseph Mifsud for the first time actually at a university in Rome called Link Campus, which the CIA and the FBI trains at. So clearly this person, however he was described by Mueller, was fake, and I think it was intentional to make me look like somebody I was not and to obviously harm President Trump. The information that's come out recently about this person, Joseph Mifsud, is that just last week he was outed in Rome living two blocks away from the U.S. Embassy, and he's still on the payroll of this CIA school there. So it was very interesting to see that when I went public with this information last week, that the president called the Italian prime minister, I think 3 days ago, and I'm certain that Joseph Mifsud was actually brought up. That's the first thing. Now, the other questions, Stefan Halper was never even brought up during my interrogation with Mueller or his team.
They didn't ask.
Because if I had known, no, they never asked anything about him. And the only thing that they asked me about Alexander Downer was if I remembered anything about my meeting with him.
He's
and the only
Australian
thing I told
diplomat,
Mueller was,
so he's the second one in this chain.
Yes, and Alexander Downer is somebody who I told Bob Mueller, the FBI, and I even testified to Congress about this, that I felt that he was recording me and spying on me. So wherever this information came from, this Clinton ally, Alexander Downer, going apparently to the FBI and suggesting that I was talking about hacked emails is completely absurd. And I would really reference people to read my testimony to Congress, because I think Congressman Mark Meadows maybe dropped a big hint about 4 weeks ago on Fox News when he suggested that ambassadors were conspiring with the FBI, and I'm pretty sure he was talking about Alexander Downer.
Yeah, and he was asking about whether you had been shown transcripts of conversations, and you're like, wait a minute, was I being recorded? The Federalist had an interesting take in going through the Mueller report and said that some of the most glaring things were the things that weren't included in the report. They said this: there's not even an attempt to grapple with the theory that Papadopoulos was set up based on sketchy approaches from U.S. government informants and foreign counterparts who seemed to be fishing for validation from Papadopoulos that he had knowledge about this so-called Russian dirt. The Mueller report apparently never even talks about Joseph Mifsud, or at least they never talked to him. So what do you think they did with the information you gave them?
I think that they buried it, and I'll give your viewers an interesting hint and some information. When I told Andrew Goldstein and Zelensky, the two prosecutors who were involved in my case, that I felt that Alexander Downer might have been spying on me, they asked me, how did you know that he was recording your conversation? These were Bob Mueller's people telling me this. And basically what I did was I demonstrated with my phone what I felt Alexander Downer was doing and how he was spying on me. And you could hear a needle drop in the room, suggesting that that was information that probably I should have never known was happening, and two, repeated it. So all of these informants and assets who were coming my way, you know, I don't know who was sending them, but I'm pretty sure it came from the top, including Brennan and Comey themselves, because what these informants really were after were not about Russian ties. I don't even understand how George Papadopoulos, a man like me, who was hired to join the Ben Carson and Donald Trump campaign because of my ties to Israel and Egypt, became patient zero of a Russia conspiracy. Okay. It just doesn't make sense.
But let me ask you this, because you did in October of 2017 plead guilty to lying to the FBI about your contacts in some of these conversations. You served 12 days in jail for that. Do you accept responsibility for that?
Look, I accept what's in my plea agreement. The only thing I will state is the person that I apparently lied about, Joseph Mifsud, was lied to the American public and called a Russian agent when we now know he was actually likely working with the FBI when he encountered me. And if I had known that information, just like if I had known that Stefan Halper was recording me and spying on me and that I was completely innocent during my meeting with him, as I believe the Federalist article that you're referring to suggests, then I probably wouldn't have pled guilty. But you know what? Hindsight's 20/20. Whatever happened. My goal now is to help the new investigations that are going to be looking into those who investigated us. And I think, Congress and the president himself probably have a lot of information that is going to exonerate not only myself, but others on the Trump team and even the president himself.
Well, as we talked about last night in the president's conversation with Sean Hannity last night, he says he's going to declassify everything. So I feel like we're continuing to learn new things all the time, including about your case and others. George, thank you for joining us tonight. Very interesting.
Thank you so much for having me.
Okay. Vice President Pence weighs in on the FBI agents he says tried to allegedly infiltrate the Trump transition team. We've got some late-breaking details on that next.
Keep it down there. I have a system.